So I wanted to make another video on, I guess, talking about spells and tier lists and everything else. And I think I've said it in my first video that I don't really like making tier lists, so I'll explain why I'm even making this video in the first place. And just so I guess there's some context to this, the first time I made this tier list was probably around, I would say, 3 to 4 months ago, when the Blood Book first came out, because this tier list does actually include the Blood Book. So it was around that time, and there's been one or two patches since then. There's been a few updates to the Blood and Illusion book, and I think there's been a few slight changes to other things as well. So we can talk about all those. But yeah, the reason why I guess I'm trying to make this video is because I often see a lot of questions or comments on Discord and whatever else, or in-game, where people might ask, hey, why does a certain, spell or a certain minion belong in a certain slot? It feels like they should be somewhere else. And more often than not, they're actually very correct. I think, in the last 2 to 3 months, despite what people think, the meta does continue to evolve. There's been a lot of change in the meta. And I guess when I put together this tier list for the first time, I never really gave my in-depth thoughts on every single spell, and I probably didn't spend as much time as I possibly could have with each of these spells as well. So I think, as we go through the spells today, for the most part, at least across, I would say, the top couple of tiers, I would try to go through each spell individually, talk as much as I can about my opinion of it. And as we get to the lower down ones, there'll be some or a group of spells which are quite obvious about why you can or can't use them, and that's a separate topic. The second reason I want to make this is because I often hear people say that there's not enough variety in 60G. It's always the same thing. It's always Dark Knight. It's always Drain. It's always Flight. And personally, I just don't agree with that. I feel as if the more you get an understanding of the game, the higher level of play that you end up having, you realize that there's a lot more spells that are actually usable, which is interesting. People tend to think of, the higher rated you are, the less spell pool you have. It actually kind of works the opposite way, because you end up realizing that there's a lot of situations where some spells are just better than others. So I guess that's the two main reasons why I want to update the tier list, and two, I just want to, have a discussion about variety. And just another thing, I guess a third reason, if you must, I think, both in terms of playing a lot of games myself and also spectating other people's games, it's given me some insight into how certain spells can be utilized. Some spells which seem weak in my hands, I might have seen some others use it very, very effectively. So it's always interesting. And I think what we'll do is we'll start from the very top, and we'll just go down and look at every single spell. If any spell has changed, I'll move them to their new tier list or their new tier slot. If they haven't, then yeah, we'll just leave them as is, and I'll try to explain my rationale for each one. As always, this is just my opinion. I know everyone has different opinions on different spells and everything else. So yeah, feel free to give me any suggestions or any perspectives or any other spells that I might have missed as well. A good example is I put Chain Lightning in the B tier, which I got a lot of feedback from people saying that's not right, and it was a very good point, I think, by many. So anyway, let's take a look at the top tier of 60G first of all. So I think Arcane Gate we don't really need too much of a discussion of. It's pretty self-explanatory as to why this spell is here. There's probably about 2 books, I would say maybe 3, that don't actually run Arcane Gate. The exceptions being Full Rock, Full Illusion, and maybe in some fringe scenarios you can run it without, you can run Glide instead so you don't get knocked off. But even when you're not, I guess, considering being sunk, Arcane Gate is just a good positional tool, as it allows you to escape from traps or whatever else. So I think Arcane Gate is and will always be one of the most core spells of the game. Flash as well. I guess when some new players first start the game, they feel as if Flash isn't that essential. Flash is a lot more than just knocking people off the map. Flash is about being able to open up terrain and generate space for you to do things. So Flash is here and most likely will always remain for quite some time. And I believe I talked about it previously, but S is the S tier is for anything that you'll see in almost every single game of 60G. Drain is probably the best recovery tool in the game. Swarm and Dark Knight, I would say that it's the combination of these two spells. Dark Knight by itself is a great minion. If the level 1 for Dark Knight was not Swarm, I'm not sure if I would put it as the S tier. For example, if the Dark Knight's level 1 was Storm Spirit, or I don't know, it was just something useless. The minion by itself might not actually be good enough to warrant a spot here. But because of how good Dark Knight is, I don't think I need to go too much into this. It just gives you such a strong presence on the board that it forces your opponent to play defensive. You can just chuck the Dark Knight out and they have to play on the back foot because otherwise they might get killed in one turn. Tree, possibly the best spell in the game. Don't really need to talk too much about that. And Blast from the Past is pretty much an essential component, of any 60G game. I guess what's interesting, I don't think I'll be changing any of the top slots unless if someone feels that something else should be up here. It would definitely be an interesting discussion. I think these are spells that you're pretty much always going to have for any 60G game. The one contender that I see people raise a lot of the time is Flight. And Flight is something that I'll talk about. Actually, we might as well just talk about it now because it's right next on the tier list. Flight is a really interesting spell because some people seem to think that it's overpowered, and others seem to think that it's essential in 60G. And I think that's something to keep in mind as we talk about every single spell on this list, because one thing that I try to explain this because I'm a strong believer of this is that spells don't come for free in Arcanists, right? A spell can be good. I mean, it's the same with everything. In any game, just because something is good, that doesn't mean that it's great, right? There's a lot of good spells in this game, and you would be happy to take a lot of spells, but you don't end up taking them because at the end of the day, they're just not good enough, or they take up too many spell slots. And we'll talk about this, I guess, especially when we get to the B and C tier. I feel like it will make a lot of sense for that. But anyway, let's go back to the topic of Flight. So Flight takes up Storm Spirit, it takes up 3 spell slots, which is not always ideal, but I think the more important thing to think about Flight that people don't always consider is if you're taking Flight as a spell, why are you actually using Flight? Is it just for mobility around the map? And I decided to just include the sandbox map here for a little bit of reference because we can look at how we can utilize different spells. And you could say, well, what if I start down here? Or what if I start down here, my opponent is this recall device over there, and I need to get from where I am all the way over to where they are to knock them off? Well, that's fine. But just, I guess, think about a lot of your games and what you're actually doing with the Flight spell. Are you flying turn 1 to fly over to flash them off? And then what do you do with your Flight after, right? Are you just using Flight as a mobility tool to get around the map? Which is not an issue, but there's different mobility tools from just Flight in the game. You've got Glide, you've got Vine Bridge, you've got a couple of different options. You've even got minions that can transport you across the map. So why do you need Flight in every single 60G game that you play? The one place where Flight does excel is when you literally need Flight, which is towards the side of the map, right? If you're side hiding, if you're playing defensive, if you need to remain above water, and if you weren't flighted, you wouldn't be able to get there. That's where flight is able to offer its value. So unless you're trying to do that, just think carefully about whether or not you want to take flight. Don't get me wrong, flight is an excellent spell. It's an amazing spell. It's a very well-rounded spell, and it's easy to use. But for me, it doesn't quite sit in the S tier because it's not actually essential. It falls under the tier of it's a great overall spell. There's not really many flaws with it, and that's why it is where it is at the moment. The next spell we'll kind of talk about is Pebble Shot, which is interesting. Pebble Shot has two main usages. The first is to help break store. Back in the day, there was a lot of books with double towers, right? Before, I guess, Holiday, before Illusion, before Blood, there wasn't as many options in the game, so sometimes people would run double tower as a second defensive option. So Pebble Shot was very good at breaking that. Pebble Shot is also just good in general for breaking a book with towers. I think the most important thing is that Pebble Shot allows you to break store in quite an efficient manner. What I mean by that is you can Pebble Shot down the side and usually you'll get to the bottom in just one use of Pebble Shot. Whereas Flash, if they treat a side, you might need to flash 3 or 4 times, about 3 or 4 turns. Pebble Shot, usually 1 or 2 turns you'll get down there, and that can be really important. If you're taking 3 or 4 turns to flash down, just think about the fact that there's only 60 turns. You know, they'll tree again, they'll put minions there. It's just really, really complicated. So Pebble Shot offers a unique way for you to get down to the bottom of the map. The other more obvious aspect is that Pebble Shot actually deals 50 damage, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's quite relevant. A lot of 60G books nowadays don't actually take anything in its original spell book that does more than 50 damage. You know, sometimes you have Bloodlust, sometimes you have Mega Boulder, sometimes you have Shock Bomb, but that's not always the case. 50 damage is important for 2 reasons, I guess. One, it's, you know, it's a fair amount of damage. Like, it's not a lot, it's good enough. And the second thing is that it's just enough to kill a lot of tier 1 minions. What I mean by that is things like your Sylph, which is 50 health. You've got things like Recoil Device. Obviously, you don't see these minions, but it's important that it checks for those threats that your opponent can put out. Now, I guess it comes back to the question of, does it actually belong in the A tier? And I guess it's how we define the A tier. A tier is just generally good spells to have. I would say it's a low A tier, right? You could, if I was thinking of a spell to swap out of a generic book, I would look at swapping Pebble Shot out for something else. So you could say it's high B, lower A, but let's put it there. Let's keep it there for now. Snowball. Okay, so Snowball is an interesting one. I don't see a lot of people take it in their original spellbook, myself included. I don't like to take Snowball that often. And Snowball is a good spell to check things like Pegasus. It one-shots Pegasus. It kills Dark Knight most of the time and most 100 health minions. Sorry, not most of the time, some of the time. Things like Man Trap, yeah, other things usually do survive it, so it's not straight up kill. It does a good amount of damage, but I think A tier might be a little bit overrated. The main reason why you would take something like this is if you were taking Snowball, so your Snow Giant has Snowball. You know, Snowball and Snow Giant together make a really good package, but it by itself I don't think should remain in the A tier. So let's probably just move this one down. Okay. Ice Shield is amazing. I think anyone that plays enough 60G will know that Ice Shield is one of the best spells in the game, and the main reason why is just because of the amount of tempo that you end up having. I believe I did a separate section on Ice Shield, which will be later on in the book, but there's a lot of areas where you can set up for Ice Shield. For example, if your opponent's here, you can set up an Ice Shield here, summon a swarm outside. The main usage of Ice Shield is you can set up 2 layers of Ice Shield. It gives you that tempo advantage, and every 5 turns, you know, you can use it. It's rechargeable. So yeah, it's incredibly important in a 60G game. So I think it remains in the A tier, high A actually, borderline, I would say S tier. And I guess maybe the way that we do it is, I guess everything on the further to the left the spell is. Let me see if I can actually add that in there. You know what, that's too much effort, scrap that. We'll just keep it as is. Okay, Protection Shield. Protection Shield is an interesting one. The only reason why you would ever take the spell is to run it with Flight. And you actually don't need to run Flight with Protection Shield, although it makes it a lot worse. If you're using Flight just for mobility, if your book is an aggressive book, just think about what's the point of you Protection Shielding half the time? Is it to stop you from being knocked off? Like, let's say, for example, I don't know, you're on the top part of the map and you Protection Shield up here. Why are you doing that? So Protection Shield is essentially, it's just a Sophie of Healing. It's like a glorified Sophie of Healing, right? And it keeps you in flight, which is good, but when you're at the top of the map, what's the point of that? Protection Shield is able to show its value when you need to keep flight for whatever reason, or when you need to exceed the 250 HP threshold. And most of those scenarios come in towards the side of the map. There might be specific scenarios where you need to keep flight against things like Lich, where, yes, that's great, but generally Protection Shielding for no good reason is not always a good move. One, it loses tempo. 2, you can get entangled, and 3, you can get sanctuaried. So all of your Protection Shields just get washed away. So its specific interaction is with flight, which makes it interesting. You're not really going to see it by itself, but that doesn't mean it's not a good spell. So look, I think we can drop it slightly into the B tier. It's a tough one because flight's an A, so Protection Shield should kind of be an A, but I guess if we're looking at each spell individually, Protection Shield will sort of sit in B tier. Obviously, running Protection Shield allows your Pegasus to also have Protection Shield, but that is very rarely, I guess, something that comes into play. I think that's useful if you're trying to store, but apart from that, there's usually better options anyway. Okay, now we get to Pegasus. Pegasus, great, probably the most well-rounded minion in the game, right? And I think one comparison that we'll do very, very quickly here is between Pegasus and Reindeer. And we'll talk about Reindeer in a second, but there's two things, or there's one main thing that Pegasus has over Reindeer, and that's the fact that Pegasus is drainable. It's not an arcane minion, you can heal off it, and the fact that you can turn it into a zombie. Both of those have strict upsides and downsides, because, you know, being able to drain a minion can help your opponent out, it can help yourself out, but in most scenarios when you're using the Pegasus, you're not using it to trap the opponent in an aggressive way. Like, you might trap them, but you don't really care if it gets drained. You know, if they're draining your Pegasus with 30 health, great, it doesn't actually do anything. So having the option to utilize Pegasus as a defensive tool, as drain food, is very, very beneficial. And that's something that Reindeer doesn't have. So even though, you know, arcane minions seem like they're really good, it's not always the case. And it's something that we'll get into when we talk about Dragon Egg in a second as well. The next thing is Sanctuary. Sanctuary is a great overall spell. It's not run in every single book, and the reason why it's not run in every single book is that it's 2 slots. If this spell was 1 slot, it would be it would be up there in the S tier, right? It's towers in 60G are always good, and I know some people don't like to take towers, they don't see the point of it. Towers are not a defensive play. It's weird, like they can be, but towers are generally an aggressive play, because think of a tower as a tower is an arcane flash, or like a small scale arcane flash that also makes it so you can't be trapped again. Let's just use a simple example. Let's say we were located here, under this little tree here. If we flash out, what's going to happen? We're going to get immediately treed with the same structure. It's the same, you know, we'll be standing right here, we flash out, and then we'll just get treed by Forest Seed again. and then we're screwed, right? We've done nothing, and we're actually more trapped than before because now there's a forest seed instead of a breakable terrain. But for towers, it creates so much open space, and the tower is so big and fat that you can't use minions and forest seed to trap it as effectively as you would for a player. The second thing is that it actually gives you a health buffer. So by creating space and having a 75 health buffer, a lot of the time, your opponent needs to spend time breaking your tower. So let's say, for example, they're trying to rush you down, you tower out of a trap, they have to Pebble Shot you, and it does 10 damage, and you can hit them back with like a Mega Boulder or a Drain Bolt. Towers overall are just really good to have one-ofs in your book. The other niche scenario in 60G, well, it's not even niche, it happens really, really often, is the fact that towers are one of the safest ways for you to survive against Dark Knight. Because what happens is, it's very, very difficult, borderline impossible, for them to use a Dark Knight to charge into a tower and keep you trapped following the charge. So when you have a tower up, the Dark Knight can't hit through the tower, so you don't get one shot by it, which is important. Okay, so now we get to everyone's two favorite minions, Snowman and the Dragon Egg. Let's talk about Snowman first. I think everyone has encountered this minion at some point in time. It's really, really strong, potentially broken for a number of reasons. One, it comes out on turn 2. It's the only, I guess you could say, tier 1. Yeah, well, it's not tier 1, but what I would say is it's the only 75 plus HP minion that comes out on turn 2. There's no other minion that is spawned at that point in time. Minions always come out either turn 1 or turn 4, never turn 2, so it's unique in that it fulfills that slot. It's also a very powerful minion just on its own. It comes with the spell Snowball. And I don't actually think that makes it better than Snow Giant, which we'll talk about in a second, but it also comes with a powerful spell. So you essentially don't have to run Snowball, which is already a good spell, and you can run a minion on top of that. It's also, and the reason why Snowball is so good is because it helps you deal with things like Pegasus, or Undead Pegasus, or Dark Knights. And the other aspect is that you can actually just put this Snowman on top of someone and just spam Snowball. And if they don't have a good answer to it, it's quite catastrophic. You can't drain it as well, given that it's an arcane minion, so there's a lot of benefits. It's a very aggressive minion, but it's not perfect. And the reason why it's not perfect is because it's really weak on the defense. Snowman is great, turn 2. It's probably the best summon turn 2. But later on in the game, if it gets trapped, it's very, very difficult to get rid of. It has 75 health, it can't fly. If it was stuck here and then your opponent treat it, it's often not worth getting it out. And there's nothing that, it's just hard to get rid of. And it has the same weakness as Ice Giant in that it's just hard to get rid of. That's the main reason. So anyway, with that out of the way, I would say it remains in the A tier, not the S tier, because not every single book will run Snowman. You can run it in a lot of books, but I feel like it's definitely up there in terms of A tier, but doesn't quite break that barrier of auto include. We missed Cog Tower. Cog Tower is just a great, well-rounded spell. It's different to Sanctuary in that it's one spell slot, and we kind of got sidetracked talking about towers in general, but the reason why Sanctuary is so good is because it creates more space than any other tower in the game. When you Sanctuary, opens up a huge amount of space. Cog Tower, you can think of it as like a mini, like a Cog Dragon Rake. That's the size of it, right? Whereas Sanctuary is like an actual flash, if not bigger. So the amount of space given makes it harder to trap. It also removes things like Storm Shield, which used to be in the meta quite frequently. Removes things like Protection Shield, Flight, Auras. Great for stalling against Lich. It's it's the most well-rounded tower. You do have to take Man Trap, but you're not too upset about that since Man Trap, depending on what you're doing with it, you can always just use it as drain fodder anyway. And we get onto Baby Dragon. So Baby Dragon is a really interesting one. I think a lot of people think it's overpowered. I've talked about it before. This is just purely my opinion, and trust me, I'm trying to be unbiased on this, but I don't think Baby Dragon is better than Snowman or Pegasus in that regard. Baby Dragon is a really powerful spell, and I guess the time at which you see it as peak is when you don't have a way to deal with it. But you often don't have a way to deal with Baby Dragon if you're already behind on the map, or behind on control over the map. Let's say you're on the side and they put down a Baby Dragon. It feels horrible, right? It feels horrible, yes, because it just grows in strength every single turn. But to be honest, you've already lost control over the top of the map. That's kind of your fault, right? You shouldn't have lost control over the top. And if you do, then you have to deal with Baby Dragon as a result. But the weakness that people might not see as often for Baby Dragon, there's two weaknesses. One, it's 25 HP, it gets one shot by everything. It's weak to aerials, and the other thing is that it's horrible. It's really, really, really bad defensively. Okay, sorry, maybe that's an over-exaggeration. It's not horrible, but compared to something like Pegasus, it's nowhere near as good. Because let's say, for example, I'm trying to side hide on this side of the map. I fly down here, my opponent is, they're right here, they're flighted, they're going to chase me the very next turn. If I summon a Baby Dragon here, if I didn't have Pegasus, I would just die. They would just come down here and they would just kill me. The other thing is, Baby Dragon spawns on 25 health or 35 health, right? If I was trying to trap an opponent, let's say top of the map, by summoning a Baby Dragon egg on them, they'll just kill it in one turn. They can even just kill it with swarms if they have 2 swarms out. Whereas a Pegasus, given its 100 HP buffer, is incredible. Like you can use it at any point in the game. As soon as you go down to the side, you can summon a Pegasus, and it gives you a great health buffer and allows you time to store. So it's a much more defensive option, Pegasus that is, compared to Egg. Egg's a smaller size. It's an arcane minion. It actually has an attack, which is really good. The Rake is actually a great attack because it kills things like Swarm, Sylph. It does 50 damage AoE. It's amazing, but it takes a bit of time to get up. Like, it's a lot of investment, and it's a strong offensive option. It's strong if you're winning, but not strong if you're behind. And I think that's the weakness of the Egg. A lot of the time when people lose to Egg is because they're already behind and they feel horrible losing to this thing. And I mean, I've been in that scenario too, but I think, when a lot of people use Egg and they're actually losing the game when they have Egg, it can feel like one of the most dead spells in your book, because at that point it really is. So does it remain in the A tier? Sure. It's a well-rounded spell. You should always look to include the Baby Dragon Egg if you have a spare slot free, but I don't think it's an auto-include. I actually think it's worse than Snowman and Pegasus, and I know there's been a lot of talk about nerfing it. I would look at nerfing the Snowman before looking at nerfing the Baby Dragon Egg. I've taken it out of most of my books myself as well. So we get to the next part, Arcane Portal. Okay, I don't know what I was thinking when I put this on B tier. This spell is great in 10G, but this, as I rightfully typed here, is a 60G spell list. I can't remember the last time someone used Arcane Portal in 60G. There is a niche use in original OG Arcanists, but here it's not as good. Or I don't know if the interaction is still as valid, which is you could flash someone off, and then you could portal grab them to sync them. It's a lot more difficult to do that here. I don't know why, if it's the portal hitbox, if it's the way the portal spawns, whatever reason it is, we don't see portal. I have not seen portal in the last 3 months in any 160G book, so we're going to drop it down a couple of tiers, and you would never use the portal just as a normal portal, basically, because you have 60 seconds, you have flight, you can get across to the other side of the map. Given that you can still maybe portal grab, if you're going to risk it a lot, I would put it in the D tier. Okay. Next we have Arcane Arrows. So Arcane Arrows is a good overall spell. It breaks. It doesn't actually break side hiding, but it does punish side hiding, because if someone teleports onto, let's say, this side of the map, and you don't have flight, you can Arcane Arrow them, sink them for probably about 80 to 90 damage, waste one of their turns, but they can always teleport into the gap that you Arcane Arrowed, and that's fine. Like, it's just a one-turn burn, right? And the thing is that if they're using Arcane Arrows to sink you, they probably don't have flight, so it doesn't help break store that well. The other thing that Arcane Arrow is actually really good for is that, I mean, it's just good for killing things like Swarm. If you're slightly trapped within a tree, you can always Arcane Arrow to break the tree, and especially if they're not expecting it, most of the time you can get a Swarm kill with it. So if you're here and the Swarm is here, you can shoot, break the tree, 3 arrows come out, they kill the Swarm, and yeah, it's good. So it's a good overall spell. It's something that you can look to tech into. You can combine it with Imps. If you're running Imps, you basically need Arcane Arrow or Arcane Glyphs, one or the other. And yeah, it's an interesting one. I guess the thing is, does it belong in B tier? Given how niche it is, and given how rare of an option that it is, I think that it should probably drop down to C, right? The key interaction with it is, I mean, let's just see where Glyphs is. Glyphs is at D tier. I think Glyphs and Arcane Arrow should probably sit around the same place, because the main reason why you would use either one is to charge up Imps, but we'll get to that in a second. Mud Ball, Mega Boulder. Mud Ball is kind of crap. You don't really want to use Mud Ball in 60G. Mega Boulder is good. I guess the main thing about Mega Boulder, which makes it good, is that it can kill multiple minions in one turn. And, you know, if you have a Pegasus out, if you have a Dark Knight out, and they get a good Mega Boulder off, it can kill both your Pegasus and deal 100 damage to you and kill your Dark Knight, or if you kill like a Swarm or something. The amount of tempo you get from something like this is quite strong. It also sets them back really, really far in terms of health, and it's a second threat in your book. So Mega Boulder is actually, I would say, I would actually think Mega Boulder could be in the A tier. You're not unhappy to include this. It's a good option, and I think there's enough open slots in the generic 60G book that you can consider Mega Boulder in there. The other thing is that Mega Boulder increases your lethal range. What I mean by that is when you're in 60G and you're on, let's say, you know, the health is a resource. From 250 down to a certain threshold, your health is always your resource. So you would always rather you take damage than your minions take damage, or your swarms take damage most of the time, right? You would rather take that damage until you're about to die. And the best example, I guess, a lot of the time is something like Shock Bomb. You don't want to be below 80 HP because you will lose. Well, Mega Boulder bumps that up to about 102, 103, something like that. And of course 125 if they chuck it properly. You can suicide with it, it does 102 consistently, but yeah, they can always do a better Mega Boulder, and it does 125. The other thing, of course, is if you combine that with Swarm, it's a lethal range of 140. So I would say the biggest value that Mega Boulder has is that it increases your lethal range, so that they have to play more defensive earlier. They don't have as much of a health pool to just mess around with. The next spell is Shock Bomb, and actually Mud Ball we talked about a little bit. Let's keep it here for now because Mega Boulder is A. Shock Bomb I don't actually think is that good anymore. I don't see anyone running this by itself just for the sake of Shock Bomb, except Doug, who's amazing with it, but no one else is really running this. I actually don't think it should stay here. I think B tier should be spells that you would be very, very happy to have in your book. And I don't think Shock Bomb is one of those spells, just with all the nerfs that have been attached to it. Shock Bombs, the main reason why you used to run Shock Bomb is because you could Shock Bomb people off the map on the first turn with a Shock Bomb stick, or even without a Shock Bomb stick, it had a huge knockback. For example, where I'm standing now, Shock Bomb used to sink you. In the new iteration, Shock Bomb will probably sink you if you're standing here, and maybe here. I'm not even sure if it would sink you from here. If you were here, it would definitely sink you, but it's just the effectiveness of the first turn Shock Bomb has decreased significantly, and that's what people were mainly using it for. Because in rush books, getting that 80 damage on the first turn was ridiculously powerful. Shock Shield, on the other hand, is interesting. The problem with Shock Shield is that you don't always get the full 5 charges off. It's different to Swarm, because Swarm you pretty much always get 15 damage. When you have a Shock Shield up, they're going to trap you with Terrain, right? Or they're going to trap you with Forest Seed. Or you're in the tower and you can't utilize the Shock Shield. So you're not actually getting the 125 damage from it, which is a shame. It's not a bad spell by any means. It's a fairly good spell. I just think it's I just think it's decent. And I think B tier is probably the right place to put it. Ice Tower, compared to the other 2 towers we have above, Clock Tower can move around, which is actually quite relevant a lot of the time. Sanctuary, obviously, Sanctuary. Ice Tower, I would actually argue once also. I think any tower that is rechargeable and is accessible should be in the A tier, and that's because I guess Ice Tower is just good. It helps you. It protects yourself against things like the Snowman, which is a huge part of the meta, and also the Snow Giant, which is a huge part of the meta as well. So yeah, it belongs up there along with everything else. And of course, you're taking Ice Shield already, so it's only a 1 spell slot investment, which is great. Snow Giant, I think, also belongs in the A tier. I would say it's comparable to the Snowman. Snowman. It does come out turn 3, but the thing about Ice Giant is that it creates a blizzard above your head, or above its head, and that's both a strength and a weakness. But 1, it heals itself. 2, it creates terrain, which is great. It's drainable, so very, very strong defensively. Compared to something like the Snowman, it's never going to die. Like, it's even harder to kill than the Snowman, and it just gives you so much top control. Like, even if you didn't run Snowball, and this is something that I plan on trying, just running Snow Giant without Snowball is just a big fat minion that your opponent will never kill. Like, just think about their spells. How on earth are they going to kill Snow Giant? Are they going to Pebble Shot it 2-3 turns? Because you can't kill it in 2 turns, because it's going to heal from its from its Snowstorm. Are you going to Mega Boulder it? Are you going to Shock Bomb it? Like, how on earth are you going to kill this thing? You're just not. So the best play around it is to trap it, and that's not a good answer at all. It's a really, really strong minion, and I think it's underutilized. I hope it stays that way, because it's a pretty disgusting spell alongside Snowman. It is a tier 2 spell, and I think it's very, very much worthy of that spot. Lich is interesting. Lich, I think, is one of the best books given the current meta. I would not put Lich as S tier because it's too easily counterable. A good Lich, though, can play around things like Skyray. You can even beat Shining Bolt. It's not hard. Lich loses to Rush, and Lich gets stored out easily. But not enough people know how to store out Lich at the moment, which makes it really strong. And I think in original, like OG Arc, Lich was something that you had to account for whenever you played rated games, right? Because there was a much bigger player base, and you could just search rated just random queuing and you'll find someone. You don't always need to go to the lobby to ask someone for a rated game. So there was always a chance of you running into Lich. So if your book could not deal with Lich consistently, it was a bad book. So every single book people needed to learn how to play against the spell. And that's why people took double towers, or they took aura, or they took zombie pixies, or whatever it was. Like they had ways to deal with this thing, and that's not the case anymore. And I think Lich is really, like, it's a full book, which I know I said I wouldn't really talk about in this section, but it's a damn amazing spell. Skyray is fine. Skyray you need Protection Shield to use. It's like a 1.5 spell slot investment because you don't always want Protection Shield. So it's fine, it's very accurate. It does 50 damage. It's mainly used for killing things like swarms, but at best you're going to get a 1-for-1 trade with it. I don't think it's that good. But the main reason why I don't think it belongs in the B tier anymore is because I actually think that Rain of Fire is just a better Skyray. So I will drop this down. Skyray is a good overall spell, don't get me wrong. Yeah, I guess because it's a good overall spell, maybe we should keep it in B. Yeah, it's a good I'm not sure. I guess we'll keep it in a very low B tier for now. Pixies, absolutely amazing spell. It's very tough to play correctly, and not many people play it that well. I think at its very, very best, it has the potential to be A tier. I'm not sure how it will play out with Wrath being nerfed, Nature's Wrath being nerfed, but I think B is a fine place for it now. Vinebridge, I'm actually going to bump up to the A tier just because it's a great spell to have in your book. It's very, very powerful in the control game, which is what 60G is all about. And yeah, I think it's very, very useful, especially with mobility, that it helps you get across the map. It's a similar situation to Ice Shield in that it gives you tempo, but Vinebridge is front-loaded, whereas Ice Shield is back-loaded. What I mean by that is you can do 4 Vinebridges in a row. Ice Shield, it has a 5-turn cooldown, meaning at most in a 60G game, you can use it 12 times. So you can think of it as a 12-use spell, but you have to space it out. So the amount of tempo you get all at once is less compared to Vinebridge, but it's a great overall spell. Entangle is only good against Protection Shield. Sorry, well there's two scenarios where Entangle is good. One is against Protection Shield, and 2, you can sort of combine it with Vine Bloom. That's not that great, but I guess if you think about what you can do with Entangle, there's this trick that you can sort of do, if you could call it a trick, where if you know your opponent wants to hide, and they want to go to the side of the map, but you don't want them to leave, you can spam Entangle on them every single turn until they lose the game. So what I mean by that is, let's say they're here, and you have 2 swarms out. You stand on top of them, you entangle them, or let's say you have 3 swarms out, right? You entangle them, and because they're entangled, they can't really move. And let's say they don't really care, they just drain your man trap off, or they drain yourself off. You hit them with 3 swarms, so they lose 45 health, and they healed 30, they lost 45, so they got a net loss of 15. You put the man trap back on them, you entangle them again, right? And they drain the man trap off. You hit them with 3 swarms, and slowly there's actually nothing they can do because they want to teleport away or they want to get out of here somehow. But because they're actually being entangled every single turn and they're losing health from it, they're gonna very quickly lose the game. And you might say, oh well, I might not always have 3 swarms out, and you'd be right. Well, 2 swarms or even 1 swarm is enough. If you zombify the man trap, they can't drain it, and at that point in time, you just keep spamming entangles, and they eventually lose the game, which is interesting. It's a very, it's not a strategy we see very often, but yeah. Man-Trap is just a good overall minion. I think Man-Trap is the definition of what makes something B tier, right? It's something that you're happy to have. You wouldn't actively run it. It doesn't define your book. But if you had to take it, if it somehow, if someone accidentally chucked a Man-Trap in your book, you'll be pretty happy to have. So yeah, I think it belongs here. Nature's Wrath is disgusting. Honestly, this spell should be maybe not S tier. Well, I don't know. It defines, it screws up the entire map, right? You have Nature's Wrath here, and the game is like unplayable to get to the other side. Because you have things like Swarms, Pegasus, Baby Dragon, I don't know, whatever else. It's just disgusting. Honestly, the impact that this singular spell has by itself should be S tier. But I think, and thankfully, I think everyone in Arcanist so far has made a peace treaty to stop using this spell. Even though it's been nerfed, there's been a peace treaty to not run it. I'm glad that's the way it is. It should probably stay that way forever, because I don't think 60G needs to be any slower than it already is. So anyway, maybe I should not even put it as S, because then people are going to be like, wow, that's such a great spell, let's use it. Please don't use this spell. It's for your own sanity. I don't think you want 2-hour games, and for your opponent's sanity as well. Vine Bloom. Vine Bloom is amazing. I really love this spell. It's my personal favorite, but does it belong in the B tier? It's really tough to use. I think it has potential. I would keep it at a very low B tier. If I can do a separate video just explaining this spell, but it's a OTK similar to the Dark Knight, and yeah, I think it has potential, so let's keep it here. Water Trolls, I've actually been, if you've been watching my games lately, I've decided to pick them up and see how they fare. I think they're a great aggressive option early game. This would be my pick out of every single spell. Like, this would be my pick. I think last time I did a video on ranking these spells, I put Baby Dragon. Oh, yeah, Baby Dragon was my pick of the month, of the quarter, or whatever you call it. This time I think it's going to be Water Trolls. I'm going to try to play a lot more games with this spell, but we'll see how it turns out. I think this spell has a lot of potential. But yeah, we'll see how that is. Hydration, on the other hand, I think I vastly overrated. I don't think you need to run Water Trolls with Hydration. Hydration is a 2-use spell. If it was infinite use, maybe I'd run it. 2-use, yeah, goodbye. You can go into D tier. Reindeer, we already talked about a little bit earlier. It's Pegasus, but worse. If Pegasus didn't exist, and Snowman remained the way it was, most people would run Reindeer, I would think. It's a great overall spell. It's not much of an investment. It basically costs 1 slot because Snowman is just good, so we can keep it here. I've considered running both Pegasus and Reindeer, but yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's great defensively, but you wouldn't get much use out of it offensively at all. Curse of Loneliness. This is a really interesting one. I think Curse of Loneliness it's a meta-changing spell. I think it is almost where it needs to be. And it's a really tough one because if you made this spell 3-use, I think it would be broken. Or not broken, but I think it would be really, really strong. The way it is at the moment, people don't know how to use it as well. Even I don't know how to use it as well, right? That's why I don't run it. I think I can get value out of it, but I wouldn't be able to use it perfectly. It has a lot of potential. That's the only reason why it's not C tier. I know you don't see people use it a lot, but I think it has the potential to be in B tier. It also gives you access to Curse of Disabling, which we'll talk about later as well. But anyway, yeah, this is an interesting one. Let's keep it at low B tier for now. Comet, great spell. Cryo can do that. Well, Cryo's taught a few people now. They can do 200 plus damage consistently if you get hit by Comet head on, which makes it insane, right? It's one of the strongest spells top of the map. And what I would say is that if you can similar to the Dark Knight, as long as you have Comet, they're scared to summon their Dark Knight, or they're scared to have to be exposed. So it kind of forces them down to the bottom half. Like whenever I play against Cryo, imagine if we end up on a map like this. Where can I actually stand and not get hit by Comet? I can stand here, and that's it. And this is a horrible spot to stand in. So everywhere else, maybe here I could somewhat stand, but I basically always get hit by Comet for 200 plus damage. Comet's also rechargeable. It one-shots Pegasus, it one-shots Dark Knight. It can kill both all at once and deal damage to you. It's like a Mega Welder on a 5-turn cooldown. So it's pretty damn ridiculous. And it can one-shot you. So it even hits you on the side because it's now aimable. You can choose the direction at which it comes from, which is one of the biggest buffs to the spell. So if you immediately teleport down here, you're going to get commented still. So it's so damn strong. Does it need a nerf? No. I think the fact that it can consistently deal 200 something damage should be looked into. Yeah, it's just a really, really strong spell at the moment. It would be a high A tier, maybe even S tier, because this spell by itself defines a book. Maybe I should put it in S tier. I don't know. Maybe it might deserve to be in S tier just because the comic book is just based around this spell. And yeah, anyway. Still, not much to say about it. Good overall minion, 50 HP, summonable on the first turn. You're not unhappy to have this spell in your book. And oh boy, we get to Rain of Fire. Now this spell is crazy. This spell is ridiculous. Like this spell needs to be looked into, and I think the reason why it needs to be looked into is because every single individual trail of fire that falls down is the explosion radius is the size of a lava bomb rather than a fireball. So the AoE is ridiculous. It hits you if you're standing here and someone rain of fires you, you're going to take 75, sometimes 100 damage, right? Consistently. In OG Arc that used to never happen. If you hit 75, that was a really, really lucky rain of fire. So it's just so consistent with the way it is now. The second thing is that you can aim the direction at which it comes from. So if you're side hiding, or if let's say you're located here, right, and they used to rain of fire you, it could come from here and be a complete waste. So that's why people didn't run it, because it was too risky. But now you can choose the direction, so it's always a good spell. And even if you're standing here, rain of fire will hit you much more consistently than Sky Ray will, because it gets it takes into account the terrain above. It's just so consistent and it does so much damage, and the AoE is ridiculous. In 60G, when you're trying to play around minions, you could have a swarm out, you could have a Pegasus out, you could hit everything all at once, whereas Sky Ray only hits one thing. That's what makes this spell so strong. Like I would even argue this is, well, not even argue, I would think like this spell is better than Rain of Arrows, and we'll talk about that in a second, because Rain of Arrows does 75 damage. Rain of Fire honestly does more sometimes. And yes, it's more pinpointed Rain of Arrows, but you know, the Rain of Fire, the coverage that it has over the top of the map is just crazy. It's just a crazy spell. So yeah, I think it has a spot in the A tier for sure. Once again, a very, very high A tier. I think it's a very dangerous spell. I think yeah, it's just come about in the last, very, 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 very recently that more people have started picking up Rain of Fire. Okay, so I think that covers off everything that we had in the B tier previously. Actually, one final thing about Rain of Fire. The way you used to aim Rain of Fire is harder than what it is now. So, because Rain of Fire came down from both directions, and the middle fire trail used to not be centered on your mouse. So what that means is, let's say for example, my mouse is centered on my character here. The Rain of Fire trail would actually be slightly to the left of that, or if it was coming down the other direction, it would be slightly to the right of my character. So what that means is if you target someone in flight, you can't put the cursor on their face and expect a fireball to hit them because it might not. Or because it won't, it just won't. You have to put it slightly next to them so that if it came from the right side, it would hit, and if it came from the left side, it would miss. So now you can just, it's even easier to use. The spell is just like brain dead. Like you just put the cursor on someone and the middle fireball would always hit. Whereas before there was actually, when they weren't on the ground, when they were a small target like a storm spirit or a player or a swarm, you would actually need to adjust your cursor so that the middle rain of fire trail hit. Yeah, just a lot of small things that really push the spell over the edge, which is concerning. Anyway, we get to the C tier. Chain Lightning is fine. It's a great detail tool. It does some damage. It's very fun. You can use it with Cyclops, but I think C tier is still overrating it. Let's put it down a bit further, down into the D tier. Yeah, we just don't see the spell very often. Imps is great. Imps is a win more spell. You're never going to use this. You can't use Imps when you're behind. Imps comes into play when your opponent flies to the side. They tree up the side, and then you summon Imps, and then they resign. Or they're like, holy crap, what am I going to do? If they don't have aerials, if they don't have Sky Ray, Rain of Fire, Aura, even if they do, there's always ways to play around it. But Imps poses as an endgame like threat. But to take Imps, you need arrows, you need glyphs. It's about a 2 or 3 spell investment. You also need to be winning top of the map, which is a lot of conditions. And if you're taking 2 or 3 spells which are useless top of the map, and you expect to win the top of the map, it's a tough battle that you're going to have to fight. So, but Imps overall is a great spell. I would put it up to B tier. Actually, I guess if I randomly, yeah, I guess Imps does belong here. Cyclops is a great minion. It's comparable to Mantrap, if not a bit better. It has a better attack than the Mantrap. It has less health. It jumps better. It's got upsides and downsides. It absorbs shock shield, which is once again not as relevant in today's meta, but yeah, it's a very well-rounded minion. And I think if Snowman was to ever get nerfed, the other options that people would look at would be Cyclops again, because Cyclops used to be very, very much in the meta. Snow Giant, so Cyclops is a great minion. It's also tier 1, so very, very easy to get access to. Storm Dragon we don't actually see as often, just because it's not that great. It does 75 damage, which is pretty irrelevant. It absorbs Shock Shield, and Shock Shield once again just isn't in the meta, so we can push this down. Ice Bomb, well, Storm Spirit as well. Storm Spirit sucks, to be honest. The only reason why you run this is for flight. Yeah, I don't even think it belongs in the C tier, to be honest. Like, the spell by itself is horrible. You would take it for flight, and that's it. Rain of Arrows is, I would say it belongs in the B tier, because Rain of Fire is now in the A tier. It's worse than Rain of Fire, in my opinion, but you're not unhappy to take it because it's a 1 spell investment. It gives you more aerials if that's what you're looking for. It's a good spell overall. Ice Bomb is just a bit of a cheese. Like, you can get a 150 to 200 Ice Bomb and then you win the game. Most of the time you're going to get a 60 Ice Bomb and you're going to ask, why was this spell ever invented? You're going to ask Pure to buff the spell, but he's not going to do that, just because the spell is actually pretty balanced. It's just a very high roll spell that, yeah, just it's fine. I wouldn't recommend taking it, because you're not going to have that much success with it on a consistent basis. Storm Dragon is an interesting one. I think it's probably the dragon which is the most usable out of everything, just because it gives you a lot of control top of the map. It's taken alongside with comic books. If you have comic, you can take Ice Dragon. I would say Cryo probably uses this spell the most. He can give more advice on something like this, but having Ice Dragon, or sorry, what is this thing even called? I think it's Ice Dragon. Frost Dragon, that's right. So yeah, having Frost Dragon gives you a lot of control towards the top of the map. Frost Dragon, imagine a map like this, it can reach everything on the top. It does a consistent 100 plus damage per turn. And that's when I say consistent, that's not like a snowball consistent. It deals at maximum, I believe it's 125 or 150 or something. Any minion will die in one turn to Frost Dragon. Any tower, except Ice Tower, will die in one turn. So if your opponent is trying to play defense on the top, they can summon a Pegasus, it will die. They'll summon a Cyclops, it will die. Anything they summon will get blasted. Snowman dies in one turn as well. So it's pretty damn scary to have to play against Frost Dragon top of the map. And all the dragons actually are really good. The problem is that they take too much to get out. Like you can't invest 5 spells to get out Storm Drake or Fire Drake. But Frost Dragon is a 1 spell investment because the other 5 spells in the Ice Book, as you can see, Snowball, Ice Shield, Sylph, Giant, Tower, they're all in A and B tier, so you're actually very, very happy to pick up the Frost Dragon as a strong option. Wraith is an interesting one. I think Wraith think of it as a zombie Pegasus that you get out straight away. Like if you could summon a zombie Pegasus, it's obviously not as good as that, but summon a nerfed zombie Pegasus on 50 health, that's what Wraith is. The problem with Wraith is you have to run Raise Dead, which is literally a dead spell. No one uses this, and there's not really any niche applications. It does 25 damage. I think if Raise Dead dealt 30 or 40 damage, it would be good. Because right now with aura stacking, you can already do 30 death damage in one turn. Raise Dead does 25, but you can't really buff the spell because if you buff Raise Dead, Lich will get out of hand. So it's a really tough one, but it's just, yeah, I would say Wraith belongs in the C tier, has a lot of potential, maybe even in the B tier actually. Yeah, it's just a good counter to Swarm and Zombie Pegasus and the undead meta that 60G sometimes has. Aura of Decay, I've had my eyes opened on this spell, I think, by Cryo, playing against him a lot. This Aura of Decay you can just use it to kill a swarm, right? That would be good. Any spell that kills a swarm is a good spell. If there was a spell in the game that said kill a swarm, it would be A tier, because swarm is insane. So Aura of Decay can sometimes kill a swarm, which is great. It helps in terms of anti-store. If they're trying to store on the side and you aura them, it actually makes it very awkward for them to play around. It's not just 75 damage, it's 15 damage to everything in that area. So minions, the player, it's hard to drain heal back up. It's just good. And would I say it's A tier? Not quite. I would definitely put it in the B tier though. Maybe as I play more games against this, I will have a more solidified opinion, but I think it's definitely a stronger spell than what I thought initially. Dark Defenses, on the other hand, I think I overrated. It would probably be a D tier spell in 60G. Very, very borderline usable, not something that you would be really happy to have. You don't need healing, you don't need that much healing. Drain Bolt is enough. You don't need to heal up to 250 because if you're getting Decay humped, doesn't matter how much health you're on. So yeah, it's irrelevant. Pit is a great spell. Potentially in the B tier, I would say that. Yeah, I think it's an anti-meta spell, similar to the way that Wraith is. I think it belongs in the C tier, is fine. Paladin is just significantly worse than the Dark Knight. It's a one-use spell. The impact that it has as a one-use spell is not good enough. Someone actually compared the Paladin or the Gargoyle to a Flying Paladin, which is rechargeable. I actually really like that comparison. Because, yeah, I mean, it deals 75 damage. It doesn't even do more damage to the undead. It's one use, whereas the Gargoyle is repeatable. I think C tier is fine. Like, it's a one spell investment because Pegasus is so good. But you're not going to love it. Like 75 damage is not enough for it to be threatening. So it's AoE, it's fine, it's whatever. It can. I don't think you'll hate yourself for taking this, but it's whatever. Gargoyle though, I would say, belongs in the B tier for sure. It's a great spell, has Bloodlust, you can zombify it. Yeah, really, really good spell. Whip is fine. It gives you another way to sink people. Sometimes you can extend Whip down the side. For example, if you were here and the opponent was there, Whip would actually reach, I think. An extended Whip would reach them and whip them off, whereas Flash wouldn't. So it gives you that extra range that people don't always expect, which is really, really nice. You're actually quite happy to have Whip in your book. Elves and Flurry. Elves is okay. I think any minion is just good. Any tier 1 minion that you can summon turn 1 is good. Flurry without Elves is not good. Or Flurry just as a spell without, full nature familiar is not good. And because we're not talking about full books, let's drop it down a little bit more. Water Ball, interestingly enough, yes, I think it has some fringe use. Maelstrom, some fringe use. It's whatever. Yeah, these are all fine. Recall Device, it's a minion, belongs in the C tier. Cuckoo Clock, been nerfed. It pales in comparison to Mega Boulder, pales in comparison to Snowball. It's an aggressive option. Bloodlust exists in the game. Bloodlust is like a Cuckoo Clock, but you can do it melee range. It's AoE kind of. I would put Bloodlust in the B tier because it's pretty solid. Cuckoo Clock, not so much. Glide is a really interesting one. I would actually try to. I think this is a low A tier. Glide has been buffed. Well, not been buffed. Actually, no. Glide makes it so that you can't be knocked off. Whereas before, if someone flashed you off or whipped you off really, really hard, like if I was in the position of where I am now, before, if you got flashed off here, you would not fly back. So now what Glide enables you to do is it enables you to position in a really stupid way, or in a really, I guess, non-punishable way. You can stand here. Someone's here, you can clock them, or you could do damage to them, you could chuck a Mega Boulder at them, and being the position you are, you can't be trapped by tree or by minions, right? And before, that was punishable by Flash, but with Glide it makes it so that it's not punishable, so it actually makes it a really strong spell. Also a great mobility spell, there's not too much to say about that. Void, unfortunately, has now been placed in the dumpster. It is now unusable in 60G, pretty much. When I first made this tier list, Void was, just to give you guys an idea if you weren't here around for that, Void took up about this quarter. Sorry, this is not a quarter, maths, but this is about a sixth of the map, right? The Void would take up 1/6 of the map, if not more. That was how big it is on spawn. If you think about the current Void, the previous iteration of Void was the current Void, on its final turn. That's how big it was. So it would take up literally 1/6 of the map. So if you were ever side hiding against it and you got voided, yeah, good luck, you're dead, right? Or if you're trying to, if you get trapped and they void you and you can't get out, you're dead. So it also used to bleed you for 10 a turn. So it was you just dealt more damage. It was bigger AoE. It was just better. Hurricane is, I think, let's drop this down to the D tier. It is a great spell. I do feel like there's some fringe use, but right now Hurricane's a little bit bugged. It's just not a very good spell at the moment. Yeah, what I would say about Hurricane is that if it was more consistent, because there's been times where like I've had my opponent somewhere here, and I hurricane them, and they don't even sink, they just end up flying over here. There's no way to determine which direction it is, because it's all happening somewhere up on the top of the map that you can't even see, so you don't even know what's going on. Hurricane used to be good at getting rid of Dark Knight, at sinking the opponent in one turn. I think if Hurricane was fixed, I would put it back into C tier, but the way it is at the moment, it's pretty bad, unfortunately. So that gets us through our top 3 tiers for the most part. There might be some adjustments for D and E, but I'll try to look into that in a separate video. That video will likely be a lot shorter. I know this has already been an hour of me talking, so we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a different video.